Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all attendees around the globe for the BSI 6th Annual Conference and our last day today. Last weekend was an exciting couple of days. We heard some amazing presentations from our keynotes, from our participants, and I'm delighted that we're having today's more interactive event that you all will hopefully engage in. Just to let you know that we have this year about 1,200 people that have registered for this conference from over 90 countries around the globe. And maybe a little later on, we'll show you where those countries are, and we can appreciate how really this is a global conference. I remind you that if you have any questions throughout the morning, please post them on the Q&A, and to let you know that the chat room is an interactive room that you're also more than welcome to interact with all delegates on that chat room. But the questions, please put them up on the Q&A so that we can ask our presenters live your particular questions. So I don't think there's any more business other than to thank our sponsors once again. I don't know if we have that slide that we can put up. If not, our sponsors are Trinity College at the University of Toronto, the Department of Immunology at the University of Toronto, Harvard Medical School, and BioLegend. And also to remind everybody that we will be giving out awards for last weekend's event. That would be for the live presentations, the pre-recorded, the posters, and the hot talks. Please be patient. We will have those awards up on the website in the coming week. And once again, thank you, everybody. And I think I'm now going to hand off to Alison Alvarez, who's going to introduce our first session this morning. Over to you, Alison.
Thank you. So as we start our morning, our first panel will be a primer on research internship and graduate school. And I would like to introduce our panelists for today, Dr. Nana Lee from the University of Toronto, Kumba Sadhu from Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Florence Caro from Harvard University, and Dr. Payam Zareen from Harvard University.
Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here and excited for our sessions today, starting with this panel with one of my personal mentors, Dr. Nana Lee. So Nana will be really leading this session. I believe she's already shared a link in the chat, and I will allow her to get us started and tell us a little bit more about what's happening this morning.
All right, good morning, everyone. I love to hear all these places you're from in the chat. It's amazing. Brazil, Baltimore, Nairobi, Kenya. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Lovely to be here. Always nice to be here at BSI. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me, and thank you to all of you for either waking up early or staying up late to be part of this session. And before we start, I would like to acknowledge the land that we all work and live on, wherever you may be. We are forever grateful for our ancestors and the peoples that lived here on the land before us. So we're grateful, and I just wanted to give that moment of acknowledgement of the land that we live on. So the way the structure of today's morning is going to go, I want to make this as interactive as possible and use the power of all the brains in the room. So I'm going to be introducing the concepts of the topic of today, and then we're going to break it up into a very interactive Google Sheet discussion, and then we're going to have our panel members chime in on the results of that Google Sheet and their own experiences. That's sort of how it's going to go, and feel free to ask any questions in the chat as we go along this morning. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. So you should be able to see a big snowy mountain. And we were talking about today about graduate school internships, just creating your own opportunity. And some of us may be here because we were thinking about going to graduate school. Some of us might want to have an internship. But some of us may want different things, maybe professional school in a different country, professional school in your own country. But in all of those things, it's creating your own opportunities and finding your own mentors and finding ways to network with different people that are in the path that you want to go. So I just want to introduce the concepts of the course that I run, because it's about creating your own career path. Okay. So the first step in creating your own career path is a reflection piece. So reflection is thinking about what you're good at, what you like, and what you love to do. And there are tools that I'll talk about later on how to do that reflection piece. And then after you reflect, you need to have some sort of engagement, a meaningful engagement after that reflection. So what I call wayfinding, so finding your purpose compass. And then the third step is storytelling. So you've done this reflection, you've done this meaningful engagement, but now you have to tell the rest of the world what you've done. So how do you do that? How do you market your brand? So those are the 3 steps that I teach in a course at University of Toronto called Graduate Professional Development. I'm bringing it to you here during this session. So one tool that for you scientists out there that you can use to help you reflect on what you like to do, what you care about, what you're good at, is the Individual Development Plan by Science Careers. If you go to the Science Careers website, on the front page, there is this plan. And I'm not going to go through it today, but it takes about 20 minutes for you to fill out your skills assessments, your values assessments, and your interest assessments, and then go and how to find the mentors in the field you want to go to and how to develop those skills with what I call mentor-driven mentorship. And if any of you are in the humanities or social science, you can also use this imaginephd.com tool, and it does the same thing, but for your discipline. So I'm talking about this wayfinding. How do we do this? You know, I think about 25% of us have a calling. So you know right away what you want to do in life. But about 75% of us, you find your meaningful engagement within the career that you land in. Okay. But how do you find this purpose compass? And this was taken from the Stanford Design School that I attended a couple of years ago. And the purpose compass is, if you look at the center, is merging all these things together. Okay, so the blue circle is, what do you love to do? What makes you feel alive? And what do you like to do in your free time? And then the yellow part is your strengths and skills. What are you good at? And what would you like to be good at? And then the pink circle is, what do you care about? What problems do you feel moved by? Think about your family, community, country, the wider world. So what you want to do is kind of brainstorm in each of these sections and then come up with something that merges in the middle. And that's your purpose compass. So what I do in class actually is I put all these in Post-its. So you have the blue categories and blue Post-its, and the yellow categories in yellow, and it gives students 1 minute to brainstorm each category. And then you put them into trios. And if we were in a huge, big classroom, this is what I would do. But since we are not, I came up with the next best thing. So here's an example. If for this student said, well, I love to write, and people have told me that I'm an organized leader, and I really care about science outreach. So what you do is you can brainstorm with your friends, with your colleagues, with people in the room. And for this particular student, they came up with, I could start a blog about science friends to write about science for the general public. So whether the student goes into academia or industry or government or biotech or graduate school, this is something that they care about, they love to do, and that they're good at. And it will help them become that meaningful, it'll help become that meaningful engagement as they progress, no matter which career you go. Another form of meaningful engagement is the informational interview. And may I see in the chat how many of you have tried an informational interview? Let's just get a scan of the room. Say yes, you've tried it, or no, you don't know what that is. Not me, no. Priam has tried it. Okay, So an informational interview is when you talk to someone that's in your field and you're actually interviewing them, sort of backwards. I'll say, if I wanted to have an informational interview with Payam, I said, what was it like to do a PhD at U of T with Dr. Fish and go on to do a postdoc at Harvard? And that's sort of, you're asking them how they got to their career journey. So if you're interested in science or the medical field or science communications, you're going to find somebody within that field and request maybe a 30-minute informational interview and ask them questions that you won't normally get in, say, a book or reading online. Right? So questions such as, if you were in my shoes, right, what advice would you give me? Or what advice would you give your 5 years ago self? Right? What advice would Payam give to his undergrad self? And that way, you're kind of learning from other people's paths. So how do you reach out to these people? First, you have to find them. And right now, the best way is virtual or LinkedIn or some sort of mentor network. And then once you reach out to them, you have to find, well, when you're reaching out to them, you have to find that commonality. So most people will get back to you if there's a common interest. So if you say, I also have an interest in science outreach, or I also have an interest in graduate school in Florida, whatever that interest is, you have to state that in your email. Hello from Nigeria. Okay. And then the questions you ask is really dependent on what kind of information you would like from these individuals. And you always have to follow up. Within 24 hours, you should send them an email through their LinkedIn or however you contact in the first place for a follow-up. If there are any more questions on informational interviews, we'll have some more time at the end to talk about those. But that's a very simple, meaningful engagement that you can try. The other concept I would like to talk about is mentee-driven mentorship. So finding any opportunities, whether it's graduate school or an internship or a job, you should have a mentor, hopefully in that field, but you should also have a way to ask for mentorship because of what you want out of that mentorship. So for example, in this picture, we have a mentee here, and she's putting up her left hand. So she's telling the mentor, could you help me with my left hand? As opposed to just help me. So the best way the mentee can help the mentor is actually tell them what you need help with. And the assessment forms that I talked about, Imagine PhD and the Science Careers IDP can help you with that. For example, so let's say you took the individual development plan. It says in there that as an assessment, you need to know more about a broad-based knowledge science base. And you don't know quite how to do that other than read papers. So one thing you can do is take that form and go to your mentor, maybe Kumba, say, Kumba, I want to know more about how to really read all about science. How do I do that? As opposed to really focusing on my own discipline. And so she, as a mentor, she may help you direct you to resources or help you think of ideas for that, or ask her colleagues. So mentee-driven mentorship is something that I highly recommend. For example, I had a mentee, she's a high school student, and every month she comes up with the agenda. She said, today I would like to talk about career options after graduate school. Next month, it could be, I worked on a poster for a scientific competition. Can we go over the abstract together? I'll stop there if there are any questions. Let me pause. Any questions so far? Okay. So here I have a, this is a typical graduate school curriculum. And what I have up here is the best way to use this individual development plan is to see, well, what do you need to work on at that time? So for example, in first year, if you're in graduate school, it may be choosing a lab. So the skills you want to work on is perhaps setting up expectations with yourself and your supervisor. Okay. And you may have to think about, well, in 2 years, I could either stay with a master's or I can pursue a PhD. What are the different career options out there so that you're ready at that time? So on the left-hand side, I have all the skills that you'll be working on in graduate school, such as planning for career research, writing, presentation, teaching, and interpersonal communication. So no matter what career you go on to, these skills will be developed throughout graduate school. So for example, in writing, the first year, you may be thinking about scholarships. The next year, your transfer proposals. The third year, your manuscripts. The fifth year, grant applications. So you're progressing your writing development as you progress throughout graduate school. So if you keep sort of this timeline of skills that you may want to work on, it's helpful for you. And this is pertaining to a PhD program, but you can move this over to an undergraduate program or a master's program, just depending on what skills that you want to develop, because everyone starts at a different skill level. So now we're going to have a group activity, and Paya, maybe you can put that link in the chat again so everybody has it.
Of course, and perhaps one moment. Another reminder to all of our wonderful attendees, when you're using the chat function, ensure that you've set it to all panelists and attendees so everybody could see the discussion.
Okay, and let me share this sheet with you so we all know what's going on. And I'll just wait until everybody pops in. So if everybody can click on that Google Sheet. And once you're in there, if you can write your last name, first name, the city and country where you're from, preferred pronoun if you wish to disclose that, and your current position. And where would you like to be in 3 to 5 years, or where would you want your next step to be? You can just stop at column G, that would be great. And we'll wait until people populate this form. I love to see all the cities pop up. That's my favorite. And let us know if you're having trouble accessing this Google Sheet. So what we hope to do at the end of this Google Sheet is that we hope to provide every one of you that would like to look for mentors or opportunities to provide a resource for each of you. So it would be great if everyone can participate so that you can have a takeaway from today's session. I love takeaways.
And just for anyone looking for the link, I have just posted it in the chat section. I see a lot of people are populating the sheet, so that's great.
Yeah. So I'm just going to wait until everyone has a chance to write in there. And if you wrote something like where you hope to be, if there's a geographical preference, that would be great. If you want to do a PhD program in the US or Canada or Europe, that would be helpful. Or anywhere, you can write that too. So our panelists and everyone in the audience, once you've finished column G, if you can scroll down and read where people would like to be in 3 to 5 years, and if you can just keep in mind what you would like to tell people later on about that, if that's your specialty, that would be great.
Yeah, Pam, we all lost access to the sheet. Is there anything we can do about that?
Yeah, Nana, I'm not sure what's happening. I just lost access to the sheet as well.
Okay, so let me just retype it in. Put it in the chat. All right, let's try that again. It should not be restricted. It should be open. Let me hold on.
Okay, it works for me now.
Okay, let me put another link in.
It's working, Nana. So
It's working?
Yep.
Okay. And I put it in twice just to make sure. Okay, everyone's coming back. Good.
This could be a good time also to maybe introduce Kumba and Flor to, while we wait for folks to fill everything in. What do you think, Nana?
Sure, that'd be great.
Just a brief introduction, and we can do the full introductions later on. Kumba?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Kumba. Originally from Sierra Leone. Currently, I'm a first-year PhD student at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health.
And Flor, please.
hi, everybody. I'm Flor. I am an instructor at Harvard Medical School. And yeah, I'm so excited to be here. And I'm very happy to answer any questions. I see already some in the chat, and I'm excited to answer those as well. I have a lot of advice.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody joining us. I'm Payam Zareen. I'm a Banting Fellow working at the Department of Immunology at Harvard Medical School as well. And really happy to be here with all of you.
Okay. All right, so I'm reading all where people would like to be, and it looks like this would be a great time for all of you to share your stories, just because a lot of people want to be doing the research, sort of what you're doing right now. So maybe the three of you can take about 5 minutes to tell your story and some advice along the way and how you got to where you are today. Would you like to start, Kumba?
So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm originally from Sierra Leone, and when I was in Sierra Leone, I was very passionate about science. I really wanted to do research and learn about some of the mechanisms that I was reading in textbooks. So then I started looking at opportunities outside Sierra Leone, and I found the United World College. So I was fortunate to go to Singapore. The goal of UWC is that they bring people from all over the world and to study together in the hope to foster world peace. And after that, I went to Colby College in Maine. And while I was at Colby, I reached out to a professor to work in a lab after listening to a talk that she gave about Parkinson's disease. So I was curious just how, because you have memory loss in Parkinson's, but then I was like, how does someone form memory in the first place? So I reached out to her, and she was very kind to let me start in a lab. So I started my sophomore year, but while I was doing that, Sierra Leone got hit with Ebola, but then also growing up with several endemic infectious diseases like malaria and cholera. Infectious disease was also an interest of mine. And with the Ebola, I wanted to help and contribute in the research, but I didn't know much back then. I was just taking classes, but hoping that I would eventually go into infectious diseases, immunology, microbiology. So then I started reaching out to people that graduated from my school, just asking them. A lot of people were in Boston back then. So asking them what they did, where did they apply to, and just getting advice. So they told me about opening some certain accounts with Partners Healthcare, where a lot of the Boston universities and biotech hire people. So I started doing that, looking for opportunities, tailoring my resume. So eventually I was very fortunate to get a research assistant position at Harvard Medical School with Christophe Benoit and Diane Matisse. So while I was there, I was working on the Immunological Genome Project, where we look at gene expression and profiling for the various immune cells in different contexts, and seeing how the expression profiles change. And that was great, because then I was doing what I wanted to do, infectious diseases, immunology, and I loved it. I wanted to continue with it with a graduate school. So I started looking at PhD programs and started talking with the postdocs in my lab about what school they applied to, when did they start, when did they ask for recommendation, who to ask for recommendation. Do I ask only science professors, or do I include people that also know me really well? And Payam was actually one of the people that read my statement of purpose and gave me a lot of incredible feedback. So I went through the process, practiced a lot, gave people to just read my SOP, helped me prepare. So I did a lot of, I applied to a variety of schools. So I went through the process the 2019 cycle. Then eventually I got some offers for certain schools, and I later chose Johns Hopkins, where I'm currently at. And I also wanted the public health aspect of it, because I envision going back to West Africa. So here currently I'm doing my second rotation. My first rotation, I was looking at sex differences in vaccine-induced antibody responses to influenza. And currently, my second rotation, I'm looking at receptor binding in SARS-CoV-2. So I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you for sharing your story. And sorry, I can't read it. Is it Fleur?
Yeah, it's Fleur. Thanks.
Fleur. Okay, sorry, I read it. And while our speakers are speaking, feel free to fill in the Google Sheet until that last column where it says suggestions. You can stop at suggestions.
So I'm from Argentina, and I always knew I wanted to do biology to understand the world around me. And the first time I heard the word gene, and genome, I wanted to understand more. And so I went to university in Buenos Aires, and my first research experience, basically, I wanted to work in a lab because I wanted to, work with pipettes and do my own experiments. And so I just started knocking at the doors of labs around me, of people that, were doing exciting science. And so then finally one of the doors opened, right? And then I started, and I did maybe 3 months of research experience there. And then I graduated, and I knew I wanted to do a PhD, and I wanted to come to graduate school here in the US. From Argentina to come to the US, there's, first of all, a large, geographic distance, but also culturally, and all the application process to graduate school is very complicated, particularly from an outsider. And so what I did was I looked up all the universities in California where I wanted to go, and all the labs that I thought would be interesting to me. And I'm interested in infectious diseases, particularly those neglected tropical diseases like malaria, Trypanosoma cruzi I studied, and cholera, currently studying cholera. And so I applied to all, I wrote an email to all these 50 places. Hi, I'm Flor. I'm a biology student. I like what you do in your lab. It's pretty much it. Of those 50 people, many obviously didn't reply because these are professors that get thousands of emails every day. And so a silly email from a student in Argentina is probably going to go into the junk mail. But 20 did, right? I got, hey, hi, how are you? And I told them I was going to go on a trip in the US, just, after graduation. And I could potentially stop by their lab if they would have time to have a coffee with me. And so of the 20 people, 10 said yes, right? So I visited 10 labs in California, and some were very nice, and they showed me around the lab, and they were like, what do you want? Why are you here? And I explained, I just want to do biology. I would love to come here. I don't know how. Some people were not nice. Some people had forgotten that I had scheduled with them a coffee hour. So I'm traveling right all the way from Argentina to the US to meet with someone. I'm scared, and this person doesn't even remember me. So you will always encounter extremely nice and helping hands, but you will also find obstacles and things that set you back and that make you feel like you're not worthy, right? And you just have to, I think this is also part of the learning experience, because there's always going to be obstacles like that. You're always going to have to fight that and overcome that fear of actually encountering this like negative feedback, right? But out of the negative always comes a positive. By the end of my trip, I had 3 offers to come for a period of time, 6 months, to be a technician. And I actually believe that that is the best way to initiate yourself. Don't expect to directly go into grad school, but step by step. So I had this offer to become a technician, and I accepted it for 6 months. It's temporary. And once you're in the system, then you can understand, like Kumba said, you can ask people, what do you do? What kind of letters of recommendation do you need? What is important about this experience that I need to highlight? And so after the 6 months, I got the letters of recommendation needed from this place at University of California in San Francisco. And I applied to grad school. I applied to a lot of grad school programs, but I did not get in. Why? Because all of the exams that you have to take here, I wasn't trained for. These are multiple choice exams, and I had never taken these things. So in the US, that's the system, and I wasn't prepared for that system. And so I didn't get into grad school. However, I figured out a way. I asked my university in Buenos Aires if it would be okay for me to actually do the research aspect of my PhD in the US, but to take the classes and then get the title from University of Argentina. And they said yes. And UCSF said yes as well. So that was an alternative way for me to actually do the things that I wanted to do, which was research on malaria. And there was this malaria lab I was very, very excited about at UCSF. And again, I wrote an email. I said, hi, I'm Flor. This is, my package. Would you like to give me an opportunity? And again, I contacted maybe 5 labs. Of the 5, 1 person said, yes, you can come and do this, right? And so, and then I basically did my PhD in the US in this alternative way. So my advice, and I see also some in the chat, is you feel awkward, you were scared, you don't know the process. Nobody does. And you may find, and you should always know that you're not alone in this, right? The awkwardness, even at this stage, I am at Harvard Medical School as an instructor. I never thought I would be, right? Even today, I walk out the door here not knowing whether I'm going to succeed in my next phase, but I do know that I have the resources myself to just sit down and write that next email that's going to, or reach out and contact that next person that is going to perhaps help me out. So that's my story, and I have more to say. So always feel free to contact me and put questions in the chat. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Flor. Payam, your story.
That was really great. So it's already we've heard the story of going from Africa to East Asia to US and South America to US. I was born in Iran. Grew up there for the first part of my life before moving to Canada. In Canada, I happened to have an uncle who was pursuing his PhD in immunology at the time at the University of Toronto. So there was often this funny sort of interaction where I would follow him to the lab and he would tell me to not sit too close to him on the subway because people would think he has a kid and he was single at the time. So I spent some time when I was around between 10 to 15, just running around the Department of Immunology at University of Toronto, and I suppose kind of fell in love with the life in a laboratory then. But what helped me in my own career was at that time I realized, because I had this remarkable privilege to follow my uncle around to some seminars. And I really took an early interest in attending scientific seminars. And what really created the first big opportunity for me was deciding to attend a seminar when I was in second year of my undergraduate studies. It was a seminar on type 1 diabetes and immunology. And as I have some diabetes in the family, I just for curiosity attended the seminar to see what's happening. And curiously enough, the person giving the talk is my current postdoc mentor. So what happened was I loved the research. I stayed behind after everybody had left. I asked the question, and after the question about the work that was presented, I, just told the speaker, so when can I work in your lab? Is there any opportunity for me at all? I'm happy to start a year from now, whenever you want. This is what I want to be doing. So all she said to me was, early bird gets the worm, because I asked already a year in advance to work in the lab. So that's actually key point is I noticed even when I was applying for postdoc, a lot of labs didn't have positions at that time. But if you show flexibility, then the people you're reaching out to often also show flexibility. And the current lab I'm working with at the time, they didn't have a position. But I joined them about 8 months later than I'd originally planned to start my postdoc, which I think is still fine in the grand scheme. One thing with research is you can't rush it, whether it's an experiment or whether it's planning the next step. You have to always be ready, whether, sometimes there are opportunities that come by and you have a short window, but in other times you have to wait a bit. And I think the key, as Kuma and Flor both alluded to, is to not give up in those times. So to step back a little bit more, I spent that summer in Boston working with Diane Mathis and Christophe Benoit. And that was kind of a good experience for me to always attend seminars. It's kind of a sneak peek of seeing if you're really interested in the research. So last weekend, a lot of you were here. There were a lot of great talks, and there was at least one person who had recently started a lab in Germany, and they were asking for summer students and graduate students and postdocs to contact them. So I encourage you, if you find that research interesting, to take this opportunity. And you've already done the first step, which is finding your way to this conference, find your way to other conferences, and network as much as you can. I think it's the key thing. Even my graduate mentor, JC Zuniga Fluker, I basically wrote a mock grant in my fourth year. I read some of his papers and I wrote a fake grant saying, if I was in your lab, this is what I would want to work in. And I didn't work in his lab right after undergraduate. I went to New York to Sloan Kettering to work in a different lab. But I happened to see him and have a chat with him. And he said, well, I remember this grant you wrote, and anytime you want to start in my lab, you're welcome to. And that's basically how I started my graduate work. And again, the postdoc work, I happened to be at a conference again where I was giving a talk at the time, and my current mentor, who I knew from when I was 18, was at the talk. And you know, she was at Harvard, where I hadn't applied to any labs, and she said, why haven't you applied to the lab? This doesn't make any sense. You have to be at the lab. And so you never know where the opportunity is going to come from, but it's always going to come from you putting yourself out there. And again, I appreciate having everybody here, and this is a great first step. But make sure you seize those opportunities. And I know this wasn't on the schedule, but I see Dr. Bolahana is also here. And as he had a little bit of a different journey from us, traveling from Egypt to Europe and then to Harvard Medical School, perhaps it'd be great to also hear his story.
Thanks, Payam. Yes, this was not announced. Yes, so my name is Bolahana. Actually, I work right now with Payam in the same lab. So I'm also a research fellow at Harvard Medical School. And actually, I like quite a bit what Flor and Kumba was talking about, this sort of stepwise sort of thing, especially if your initial part of your career and education was done outside US and Europe, you need to readjust quite a bit, and you need to be quite patient with yourself. And this was my experience. So I got my undergrad degree in pharmacy. So I was even a little bit of an outsider to biology, but I always wanted to do biological research. So after that, I was basically trying to find a research opportunity. And this came from basically doing master's degree in Europe. So I went to Germany and I did my master's degree in Ulm University. And I think my line of thinking back then was, as Flor mentioned, it's not so easy to get to a grad program right away in the US because all the requirements, many of them are abolished right now in many universities. But back in the days, there was so much GRE and all these things that are probably not so easy to get in the first place. So I thought maybe doing a master's degree in Europe would be probably easier to get in. And I have to admit, this also required quite a bit of resilience, because out of sending probably 30, 40 applications, maybe you get 1 or 2 acceptance letters. And I think that's probably the key. Don't get disappointed when things don't come from the first time. So, and I think once you're integrated in the system, things come easier to you. So when I was in this university, I started to apply for internships. And from there, I did my master's thesis in Cambridge University in England. And then I went back to Germany and I did my PhD in the German Cancer Research Center in Heidelberg. And yeah, I think that probably the most critical parts are the first initial parts, because when you try to make these connections and they don't come, you feel disappointed. But I think for me, the most important thing was basically it's a believing that you're good enough that you can really make it. And then afterwards, basically, it's a matter of resilience and how many acceptance letters you're going to get out of how many encounters and emails and correspondences you're going to write. So I remember for my master's thesis, to get this position in Cambridge, I remember I applied. I wrote to 100 professors and 3 or 4 replied, 2 of them saying no and 1 said yes. And this was the one that shaped my career afterwards. So I think it seems like a little bit of like a difficult game, but I think if you really think about it, most of it is more like in your head, how much time you're going to spend really writing emails and making. And the other thing is also try what I would have done differently. And it's much easier right now to prepare yourself moving forward. So right now we see how much interest is based on bioinformatic analysis and research. So that's something you don't need to go to a lab to learn. That's something you could really self-educate yourself. Try to get yourself educated with the tools that you could really learn while you're still in your surroundings, in your university or through online courses. So I'm sure all of you are aware of what BSI is doing. So that's already a step in the right direction. So try to do more of this online education because I think that's probably the best thing that one could do before they really get to a real research career.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing all your stories. I love the common theme is just putting yourself out there and proposing things you want to be in, finding the common interest with everyone. Thank you for sharing. I just want to take this moment to explain the difference between a supervisor employer and a mentor. So supervisor employers is someone that is basically paying you to be at their company, to be in their lab, and they are supervising your project. Whereas a mentor they don't necessarily have to be in the workplace that you're at, they can be anywhere. Meeting someone at this conference, for example, someone that can take you through the steps of where you want to go and not necessarily in your work environment. And so those are two different things. And sometimes your supervisor or your employer can also be your professional development mentor, but sometimes you should have mentors outside of your workplace, just for that. And I'll just share 2 minutes of my story. I was inspired by science when I was in grade 8, and my 8th grade teacher talked about astrobiology, and I said, that's what I want to do. And when I got to the University of Toronto, they said, oh, that's my astronomy prof said, oh yeah, you just have to get a PhD in biochemistry. So that's why I ended up in biochemistry. And my postdoc, again, was reaching out to various professors that I knew in various fields that I wanted to be interested in. And I did get accepted to the Space Ames research program, but I was also interested in colon cancer research because during my PhD time, life threw a curveball at me. I lost my mother due to colon cancer, and that's something that I wanted to pursue. So I decided to go for the colon cancer aspect of it. And while I was doing my postdoc, I realized I wanted to go into industry. So again, reached out to my network, put myself out there, and then I found a colleague of mine said, oh, there's a biotech startup starting up in Toronto. And I went to the biotech startup, which was an amazing experience. And then I went to a biotech startup number 2 when life event number 2 happened, which was marriage. And then I was working in Michigan for a little bit. Now I'm back in Toronto, back in academia. So I've had quite a different experiences. So if any of you have any questions about transitioning back and forth in those 2 worlds, I'll be happy to answer those. And just for housekeeping, if you have any questions, we hope to get to them later on. But you can also type them in the sheet 2 of the Google Doc, so we make sure that even if this event is over, we can go and answer them. That way we'll answer all of your questions, because I know you have another session at 9 o'clock. So for those of you that joined us later, Allison, maybe you can type the Google Sheet again. We're going to go back to the Google Sheet. Let me share that again. All right. So people that are just joining, if you can find an empty row and fill in all the way to J. And for those of you that finished, let's see how many people are on here. We have about 58, it says. Okay. So I want to use the power of the room to help everyone here. Okay. So how are we going to do that? We're going to, let's see, there are about 60 people. 60 people. So let's divide everybody into groups of 10. So if you are in row number, I guess it's 2 through 10, but let's keep it simple. 1 through 10, you're going to help the 1 through 10 cohort. If you are in row 11 through 20, you're going to help the 11 through 20 cohort, and so on and so forth. So under suggestions, under K, okay, you're going to read that row. So you're going to see, okay, their current position. So I'll give you an example here. Their current position at the top, they're a research fellow. They would like to be in 3 to 5 years contributing to meaningful research. And then their question of who would you like to have an informational interview with? If it's a general person, such as a researcher, and if you have suggestions, then you can put the suggestions there. If you don't want to share with the entire Google Sheet your network, then you can put your email and say, please contact me and at so-and-so at such and such, and then you two can have a conversation outside. Is everyone clear on these instructions? Does that make sense, Payam?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. And mentors, if you can go, the panelists here, if you can go and read down all the suggestions, and if you can add on top of those suggestions, either within the suggestion itself or on column L, that would be wonderful. So hopefully everyone, by the end of the session, you will have a takeaway that you can build towards going to your dream career.
I am seeing, while trying to access the sheet myself, to add Bill Gates as the person I'd like to have an informal interview with. That's a esoteric thing. But actually, I'm kidding. I would rather be any of you. I am seeing that we have a lot of traffic to the sheet, and as a result, not everybody is able to edit. So I really like that this will give us a chance to continue even after this session to interact with each other. So if you're having trouble to type in, make sure that throughout the day you could continue to interact with this sheet.
Yeah, I will keep this sheet open. Maybe I'll keep it open for 48 hours. How's that? But I would like to keep it.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so I want everyone to have a takeaway. And for example, if they want to have an informational interview with, say, Bill Gates, let's say you know somebody that works at Microsoft. That would be a good step. Or if you know a website that would help them get started, or if you know a conference that they may attend, or anything that goes towards in that direction, that would be very helpful.
And actually, I see in the chat now somebody saying that I'm impressed with Bola's comment on how he wrote to 100 professors when he was looking for a PhD position. This is kind of an important point that comes up, that you have to try so many times. But I know, as Bola did, as Kumba did, as Flor and myself, a really key thing becomes not just saying, hi, I'm looking for an opportunity, give me something to do. It's more ensuring that, first of all, you understand your own interests. What are you really interested in? And be targeted. So don't apply to every possible field out there. Select a field and learn about that field. Learn especially about the people you're applying to. It always helps to say, in this paper, you talked about this, and I find this interesting. And even if they're not working on that topic anymore, it gives them an idea that this person went through the time to actually learn about my work and formulated some thoughts of their own, which really makes you stand out. Flor, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to second exactly, Pam, what you're saying, and keep in mind that the email or that first initial contact, you should convey three things. One, that you're passionate about whatever your intent to do. Two, that you're informed about, you're not just like, hi, please give me work, or please give me an opportunity. You're informed about what the other person does, right? And three, make sure you're concise, particularly in the email. People get thousands of emails a day, professors in particular. And so if you are going to write a long email, you're probably going to get overlooked. Make sure in the email it's impactful, it's short, it's the person immediately gets an idea of who you are, what you're about, and what the potential could be for them. If you want, I can share for example, when I applied for postdocs, again, much like Bola, I applied to 40 places. You always have to apply to a lot, because the chances are going to, of you getting a position are going to be much higher the more points of contact you have. So I can share somewhere in the resource an example of an email that I send that's short and concise and gets across the point and is not boring. So sorry, Payam.
Yeah, Kumba, before you start, I just have a technical question. Payam, it says I can publish to the web because there's a lot of people on here. Have you done this before? It says you can link to or embed your document. Can I link or embed? What do you recommend? Do you know?
This is a good question to ask from some of the more technically gifted people. I haven't done this either for a large
anyone know?
Maybe Stefan or Robbie could jump in with that, please.
Robbie, do you know?
Sorry, I'm not too familiar myself.
Okay.
Maybe Stefan, do you have anything to add? If not, then I guess what we could do is we could pass link to me afterwards, and then maybe we can figure out what to do afterwards with it.
Okay, because if it's easier, then I can just click publish and it'll be on the web, but I don't want it to be out there because everyone's information is on here. So I won't do this right now. We'll talk about it later after.
Okay, great, perfect.
Okay, go ahead, Kumba, sorry.
And go ahead.
Can I just add to what Flor was saying? Sorry, we are hanging out again on this sort of a number of games. I think it's also a matter of where you are in your career. Probably when you're starting, your interest is broad enough that you could have like interest in multiple fields. But as Flor mentioned, as you start to progress in your career, this would not be beneficial to you to just be like fishing in the deep sea. So probably in the beginning, when you're really trying to get a chance and you're starting with little lab experience and you're just looking for an internship, writing a concise email, a nice email, but at the same time trying multiple times would be beneficial. But when you establish a research interest there, your options start to be more focused, and they're being really more of knowledgeable about the particular works that this lab is doing, or why you fit to the research interest. That would be your key point. But I think what I was referring to, this 100 emails, this was my first lab internship. How did I get to this internship? Because back then I didn't have any wet lab experience. But later, after I established a little bit of research background, I started to be more knowledgeable, and my PhD application was more to 10 labs. So that was more confined, and the postdoc application was something on that range. But what I was referring to, this was the very initial step just to get yourself integrated in the system. If you're coming from a different background, which was my case, I was switching from pharmacy to biology. And if you're also switching across different educational systems, I was coming from Egypt and trying to get a research opportunity in Europe. So just to be clear about that.
Yeah, so Bola, exactly. That was the same point that I wanted to make. So as I mentioned earlier, during my sophomore year, the first opportunity that opened to me was a neuroscience opportunity. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this, even though I wanted to do infectious diseases. So while I was there, I did for the sophomore year to senior year. But then when I was applying for research assistant technician position, and even in my PhD application, I always said that I did Parkinson's disease, though Parkinson's disease is not an infectious disease, but I learned how to formulate an hypothesis. I learned how to troubleshoot when experiments don't work. I learned how to like present my work, and I hope to bring these skills like into your lab, or I hope to like build upon the skills in my graduate career. And so it's very helpful, even though you might not go directly to what you want, being open to opportunities. And then when eventually it does keep opening, you formulate how you reach out to people that, okay, this is what I've done, and these are the skills that I've learned, and this is how I am passionate about what you're doing, and I hope to build upon these skills.
Great, thank you for sharing, everyone.
And think about it a little bit like.
Go ahead, Payam.
Go ahead, Nana. Sorry.
Okay.
I just want to quickly think about it like when you're playing. Sorry, I'll finish a quick point to add to Kumba and Bola. That it's a little bit like when you're trying to shoot a hoop into a basketball. It might sometimes not get in the first time, but you could try more than once. I had some mentors that I was really interested in for my postdoc actually, and they didn't reply to my email. So not the next week, but a month later, I sent another email and I said, I'm really interested. Finally, by the fourth time I contacted that mentor, I left my phone number. I said, this is my phone number. I just want a 10-minute chat. And that worked at that point. So I didn't end up going to that lab. I interviewed there. At least I got a nice trip to New York City out of it. And it turned out I didn't like the lab environment anyways in the end. But, you know, it's the don't give up if the first time it doesn't work. And as Kumba said, and Bola as well, make sure you highlight something you can add as well, and it will really help you.
Wonderful.
Sorry, Nana.
No worries. So I'm going to leave the Google Doc up for 2 days. So I would like everyone to go in and put in what they would like help with. So we as mentors and I can go in and really help you talk about your next steps. But before we depart, I just want to talk a little bit about the third part of creating your career, and that is marketing yourself, strategic communications. So LinkedIn is a great place to find potential mentors, to find potential opportunities. You should have a business card. And when I mean my business card, it should be in your email. The business card should be as an email signature. And most students think that, well, I'm a student. How can I have an email signature? Well, your title is whatever student you are. So undergraduate student, high school student, PhD researcher, that's your title, right? And then under that is going to be where you work. Okay, you're either the school you're at or the lab you're at, your email, your address, and your LinkedIn URL. So for all these emails you're sending out, you have to identify yourself and put that business card as your email signature. Therefore,
presentation mode, Nana, please.
Am I in presentation mode?
No, you're not.
Can you see my slide?
Now
You
you're
see it now? Okay, thanks, Eleanor. Okay. So having that is really important because then they know who's writing, what your background is. Are you a high school student or an undergraduate student? And what part of the world are you writing from? Okay, so you need to have that identifier in your email. Your email should be professional and to the point, very succinct. And you know, the whole idea of networking, hopefully coming to this conference and filling out that sheet is going to help you a little bit of that. That's what we have, virtual networking right now. And I want to focus a little bit upon that document that you sent in, whether it's your CV or the resume, right? So the CV versus resume, does anyone know, you can write in the chat, the difference between the two documents? Try it.
Well, my understanding is CV is very academic. You list all your papers, all your important, you know, conference presentations and so on. Whereas resume should be ideally 1 page, really highlight your skills as well as, so you don't, for example, go and say, I'm very proficient in X, Y, Z in your CV. You just list what you've done. Whereas resume, you highlight those skills more and you make it more brief.
Yeah, that's right. It's to the job. So I've noticed that some of you want to do some sort of industry position. So in industry, they're asking for a resume. In academic position, they usually ask for a CV. And just as Payama says, CV is everything you've ever done. And it's usually an action item. You served on this committee, you wrote this paper, and that's about it. But a resume, an effective resume tells stories. So how do you tell these stories? And you just have to remember this acronym called CAR. C stands for challenge or context, A is action, and R is results. Okay. So for example, I asked a student, I said, what is your most impactful work? He wanted to go into communications work. And he told me this story. As a first ever TED Talk, researched social organizations on campus, publications on NPOs, organized a working group, implemented feedback, practiced my talk. I gave the talk. In follow-up conversations, I learned that several students had started their own groups revolving around social innovation and nonprofit ideas. This is a great story, but it's too long. So how do you distill the story to the potential employer on what impact you made? So what you have to do is look at the job description and say, well, what action verb do I want to highlight? So for this particular student, they wanted to highlight that they can motivate others. So then you're going to tell this story in a more succinct way. So in blue is the context or the challenge to engage youth in their own advocacy. And the action is developed and presented TED U of T talk on developing federal policies. And the result, resulting in 5 student groups to be inspired to start their own advocacy programs. So this statement gets straight to the point and tells a story of how they can motivate others. So when you're telling these CAR statements, they're not easy. We spend hours in class coming up with these, but you want to say, what have you done that's unique or special? So if it wasn't Flor, then what did she bring to the table, right? Why was it specifically special? Because she was there. That's what you want to highlight. What are the concrete actions you took to achieve the outcome? What was your impact? And you check for your car linkage. So here's some examples. On the left-hand side is basically your CV. You list everything you've done. And on the right-hand side, you're telling these stories. So an example of a science story is the very top example: to map a disease susceptibility gene, led the genomic screening of a candidate gene analysis with over 3,000 reactions a day, resulting in elucidation of the causative mutation in the publication. And the reason why there are all these numbers in here, because the employer was looking for high throughput biotech experience. So you see how it's a little bit different that you're telling these stories. And if you look up, if you Google search, what does a car have to do with a resume, you can find tons of examples on that. So for those of you, there is a Life Science Career Expo that's happening in May 2021. And the website is at lsce.ca. It's across Canada. It's CIHR sponsored, and you're all welcome to attend because you gave me the kind invitation to come here. So you're open to everyone. And we'll be talking about just careers in life sciences. And it's a whole month thing. It's twice a week. And I would, it's a very, just check it out. It's cool. Another resource is my book called Success After Graduate School, but undergraduates will be helpful for you as well. And you can look that up at the University of Toronto bookstore. I would like to thank you for your attention and feedback. And what we'd like to do now is I'm going to leave that sheet open and I'm going to share a link. Okay. So this is a list of all of my graduate professional development videos that I have made, and it talks about resumes, informational interviews, CVs, cover letters, everything that has to do with finding that next opportunity. You can peruse as you wish. It's free, open to everyone. And the other link I want to share with you is a feedback form of what you thought of today's session. And before we close this out, I would like to ask our mentors here if you can give one piece of advice. And I know you gave lots of advice this morning. One piece of advice in 1 minute for all of our attendees. What would that be? And we'll start with Kumba. You want to go first?
Yes. For me, I would say start early, because as internationals, you really need to put yourself out there, reach out to people, but then also think about, for sometimes you need to translate your document, like your transcript, and all of that. It takes process and a lot of reaching out to different organizations to do that to you and then sending it to schools. So once you start early, you have enough time to get mentors, enough time to rewrite your applications, your statements of purpose, and you're not basically rushed into the process, but you are very reflective on why you want to go to graduate school and what are the things that you've done and what are the things that you hope to do. And so that would be my key advice for today.
Great. And Flor?
This is about the statement of purpose.
No, just your one piece of advice for the audience.
Don't give up. It is hard. It's like everything, like every profession. You will find roadblocks. You will be scared. You will think you're not good enough. Don't give up. That will continue throughout. And so keep trying, the next door will open, even if 100 prior to that one did not.
Wonderful. Bola.
I would go with a mix between what Kumba and Flor said. So I think for me, the two keywords are basically preparing yourself early on and resilience. So I think science is not in short of talent, it's short of resilience. So when people who leave are not talented ones, that is resilient ones. So I think just keep going, and yeah, don't give up early on, because it's a long way.
And Paya.
That's really great advice, Paula. It's inspiring for me as well to hear about resilience. That's a key word. I would echo what everybody else said. Before I mention anything, I also want to say I know a lot of links and resources have been shared. We're extremely lucky this year to have Luca Talamo, Stefan Divic, Robbie Jin, Alison Alvarez, and so many other great contributors who will be able to post these links on our website, and rest assured you will be able to see them again if you didn't have a chance to follow the links to any of the opportunities. Nana, thank you for also sharing the CIHR sponsored career fair. That's very helpful for me as well as for everybody else. So it's great. It's great to learn about these resources. And if people have ideas about other resources, please do share them and we'll make them available on the website. One thing we can also perhaps do is create an event where you can opt in to meet with some of us again in the future in a more back and forth setting that we could talk to each other on smaller Zoom calls. We have almost 150 attendees today, which is great, but it's hard to bring everybody in. So hopefully we can have more networking style sessions on Zoom in the coming months that will spring up from this event. So finally, the advice I would give on what to do, aside from resilience and applying early, as Kumba said, this is very important, is to add to your skill set. So Kumba is an inspiration to me because I came to the lab and she knew so many things that I had no idea about that had to do with analyzing RNA sequencing and bioinformatics and so on. And she was always the person I went to because she was brilliant at this and had this amazing skill set that I didn't have. So there are some skill sets that you can build yourself on your free time. And I'm sure Kumba will agree. That's one thing is you could, for example, learn to code. And somebody in the questions asked, what do we do in a pandemic when you can't really travel to labs and so on? This is one thing you could do is you could learn how to look at clinical data, big data in, let's say, single cell studies and so on. A lot of this is available online for free. And if you can build that skill set, then you could have an edge, right? You could even be writing papers on your own and submitting them. So it's difficult, but keep at it and build the skill set. And once again, we'll share these resources, so if you miss them, not to worry, and continue to ask questions. I'm sure the panelists will be happy to continue to answer the questions as we move along in the day.
Great. So I'm being cognizant of time. So I would hope that everyone, if you have questions, please put them in sheet 2 of the Google Sheet. So we will answer them as much as we'll answer them all. Okay. So we don't want anyone to feel left out. And if I were to send you off with this hour, think about, at your whole life, you're going to have a career. And so that first job is going to be the first step of that career. So think of it that way, right? Is that transition, is that first job, but you will continually be networking, continually be writing emails and looking forward to finding mentors. And it's a lifelong skill. It's just a little bit hard because it's your first time doing this right now. But I have mentors and I'm continuously seeking them as well. So it's a lifelong process. And I wish luck to every one of you. I see success, everyone in this room, because you came and attended BSI. So lovely to see everyone. Thank you for your advice. And thank you to Dr. Fish for this morning and everyone at BSI. It was lovely to see everyone. Good luck and stay well.
Thank you so much, Nana. Such a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to Kumba, Flora, and Bola as well.